The Surge 2 is a monumental step forward from the original game and for the Souls-like genre in so many ways, it almost feels completely new. Combat is much smoother, making each encounter a deadly dance enhanced by enemy variety and level design. Gameplay mechanics were expanded, giving the player a wide variety of unique customization choices for their builds. Whether that was the 50 plus weapons you can find on your journey, or the insane amount of implants at your disposal, you could experience the game in 10 different ways. The world building was exceptional. Exploring Jericho City had so many moments of pure discovery. It was baffling how many interesting people, robots, or whatever that is, you'd find, almost all having stories of their own that you could interact with via quests or the environment. Every level was a maze at first, making each small step the player took meaningful. Then the sense of progression as the levels became familiar felt like an achievement. Finding that shortcut when low on health injections and lots of tech scrap cannot be understated. And those shortcuts aren't random elevators that loop back to the medbay, they're organic to the level itself, making the exploration and accomplishment tangible. This develops throughout the game as key moments in the story change established environments or unlock new ways of travel. The game rewards the player for going back to areas where new items, quests, or lore can be found. Even better is that almost every area is worthwhile and goes into another aspect of the world building that I wasn't expecting. I'll try not to directly compare the two games, but if you'd like to know what my thoughts were on the first one, that video will be linked below. Yet one of the starkest contrasts between the two was the overall tone. The first Surge game was always gritty, dark, and dystopic. From the moment you got off the train at Creo, exploring the facility, or trying to stop a nanite swarm apocalypse, the atmosphere was set in stone. The Surge 2 does something I really appreciate when it comes to sequels, and doesn't copy word for word what its predecessor did, but expands the limits of the established universe. Jericho City is on the brink of collapse, filled with a crazy cult, authoritarian government, and pirate robots hell-bent in enslaving humanity, but there was another side that truly surprised me. The comedy. Yes, you heard that right. I genuinely laughed a lot during my playthrough from events or scenarios I could not have guessed would happen after finishing the Surge 1. These comedic moments intertwined between disturbing sci-fi and an unsettling apocalypse were so well done that I marveled at the writers taking such a huge leap and succeeding. It made those grittier instances, which there was no lack of, hit harder because you knew there was another side to the coin. It doesn't make the Surge 1 less intriguing, but it does distinguish the games. And not all is perfect. There were some oddities and hiccups along the way. Certain aspects of the main story felt a bit lackluster, one being the choice for us to play an unvoiced and emotionless character, even though there is a caveat to that, which we'll get to later on. And the pacing of the game is 90% perfect until the ending portion, which felt a bit rushed and anticlimactic. But for the majority of the game, I couldn't take my hands off the keyboard, and that feeling started with the opening cinematic.
What if machines were pure? A basic universal concept without morals or destiny?
The Surge 2 starts off seeing Project Utopia's launch with a narration talking about humanity's influence on the Nanites and whether they can be the next evolution of conscious life or succumb to their creator's imperfections. Starting the story right after the events of the first game was the right call. There were lots of questions after finishing the Surge 1 because of its ambiguous storytelling structure, and I wanted answers. Looks like the first victim of the Nanites is a plane, and we get our initial look at Jericho City. There are some interesting details within these 20 seconds that set up the premise. For one, an intact city with a populace. I don't know if it was just me, but from the first game, I thought the outside world was more Mad Max than functioning society. The next detail I noticed was briefly seeing most of the dockyard is barren, with ships stranded, confirming the environmental degradation narrative. I was getting hyped. But then we get a character creation screen. For a game that 99% of the time you'll be wearing a helmet that obscures your face, I don't know why they added this. It does have some lore for each character choice, a mining war veteran returning from suppressing a workers' revolt on a lunar colony, a forklift operator that sued Creo and lost 3 times, or a former arms smuggler. These were small but neat details that added just enough to the overall universe without having an impact on the game itself, and confirms that we were on that plane crash. Our character is woken up by a girl's voice saying, "It's going to kill you," and the game truly starts. Off the bat, the graphics look great. This is an in-house engine called Fledge, created by Deck 13, and it's always a breath of fresh air not seeing Unreal or Unity. I wondered if one of the criticisms of the first game might have been the slow start, so right away the player gains a lot of information. We're in a prison, as the warden is heard over the loudspeakers telling all inmates to stay inside their cells due to an unknown assailant, and an audio tape gives us the time frame of 2 months have passed since the plane incident. It also explains why we've been brought here. The medical team is trying to determine if we're infected by the Nanites, and remembering the horrifying audio tapes from the first game about Nanite metamorphosis, I hope not. Oh, what the hell is that? Shit has hit the fan, as inmates are fighting each other, a nanite wolf is running amok, and we get our first boss fight? The Surge 2 gets a lot of things right, and boss fights are absolutely high on that list. Almost every boss encounter has a preamble that introduces the player to the mechanics of the fight. Whether that was the Warden's attack moves being similar to the inmates, the Hunter's traps and Gideon's rock being deployed by Captain Cervantes, or the ranged weapons before Ezra's shields, the player wasn't going blindly into battle. Boss arenas were diverse, with some tense close-quarters combat leaning towards constant engagement, or enough room where mobility and quick jabs were effective. There were some bosses where I changed my implants, specifically tailoring them to the encounter, or I knew I had to reallocate points to stamina and energy rather than health. And there were so many bosses that didn't feel unnecessary or cumbersome, rather a great test of progress from the level prior to their engagement. Adding on to this, most had multiple phases with mechanical changes that really tested concentration and healing allocations, but more on that later. For now, we punch this guy in the head and acquire our new exosuit. I was wondering if we would get some cutscene of the invasive surgery Warren was subjected to, but it seems like they've refined the craft. Props to the director here, because I was confused why we weren't getting Deus Ex, but that audio file across from the first medbay explains it.
The new MG is faster, more powerful, and sleeker than ever. Once you strap it on, it'll meld with your molecules in a flash. The metamorphosis is so seamless, you'll neither know nor care which functions are still performed by your own body.
With our new exosuit fitted, previously locked doors can now be opened, and we can finally dodge and lob off heads. Nice. Exploring the prison more, our character experiences an echo. These can be found throughout the game, where we see visions of the past. This was an interesting way of conveying the story because it wasn't vague. They're almost too straightforward, but in a genre that adores ambiguity when it comes to storylines, this was welcomed. To escape the prison, we defeat Warden Garcia and get our second echo, this time from Athena Gutenberg, the grandchild of Jonah Gutenberg, the founder of Creo. I had no idea how much this game would tie into the first one, but was pleasantly surprised with how many interwoven narratives there were. Athena gives us our main quest: find the crashed plane in a place called Port Nixon and find out what happened to her. Another amazing addition to the overall quality of life was quests weren't, "Remember that thing some random NPC told you 3 hours ago?" Instead, you have a quest log that is just enough to point you in the right direction. Speaking of right directions, leaving the detention facility has our character interacting with another human. Well, at least he looks half human. This is Brother Truman, who is part of a cult known as the Spark. He remarks the city is dying, that only his organization will bring a new order, and he would like us to talk with Brother Eli about his pitch. And get this, we have a visual cue where to go. It's the octopus. Already within 40 minutes of playing The Surge 2, I was excited that almost all my quips about the first game seemed to have been addressed. This is certainly not the last NPC you'll be spending time talking with or completing quests for, and it makes The Surge 2 feel a lot more alive than the first one, which, now that I write that, maybe was the point of the first game, but I digress. Brother Truman also explains what the gigantic wall is doing around the city. In our months-long slumber, the Nanites have started infecting the city's population, causing chaos on the streets. The government had the bright idea to quarantine the city, which that's some crazy efficiency to build something that tall in 2 months, but interestingly enough, Truman views the infections as a positive, saying humanity is ascending as a new progenitor race. I was a little worried about that sentiment since Dr. Barrett from the first game had a very similar take on that exact topic, so trusting this sparked church was a bit dubious, yet we'll see where it goes. Oh, there's also a huge nanite swarm above us. Yeah, I don't understand how that wall is keeping it out. Anyways, in the side street underneath us, our character meets the Stranger. The Stranger acts as a pseudo-tutorial for upgrading, as he's standing right next to a medibay, but there seemed to be a bit more to the character than we could get out of him. Something about his voice.
These streets are filled with scum, so what side are you on? You'll be one of the dead guys soon if you don't upgrade your pitiful equipment. Trust me, I know my stuff.
Now for exploring. The Surge 2's level design is fantastic for a couple of reasons. The first is progression. The player starts in these cramped back alleys with just one or two enemies at a time. This is where you'll grind your first upgrade material, schematics, and get the general feel for combat if the prison didn't do that already. You're also introduced to a new mechanic called the Revenge Enemy. These specific enemies are ones that have killed another player within a certain time frame, and if you can bring them down, you're rewarded with lots of goodies. This was a great incentive because not only did it make upgrading gear more efficient, but you're avenging some poor other soul who got killed by the first enemy. As you get more comfortable, you naturally push further to see how far you can go. With the allure of upgrade materials at every encounter, new shortcuts, new weapons, new armor, new enemies, there was always a reason to keep playing, and that's a great feeling. I also have to mention quickly that they added levels to the enemies so you're not guessing which upgrade material they'll drop, and that's a chef's kiss. An even greater chef's kiss was the combat, where I spent a couple of hours after the detention center hacking and whacking with such entertainment that I was surprised it didn't feel like grinding. Combat is much smoother in this game, and I see what people meant in their comments from the last video about how they enjoyed it a lot more than the first. Your character is a bit more lightweight and agile, regardless of armor type. By the end game, I was in heavy tank armor, but I had dedicated so many points to stamina and had some complementary implants to reduce stamina costs for evasion that the pace didn't die down. It just felt so satisfying at each stage of progression. I also think you could play this game with heavier weapons with slower speeds and still have fun two-shotting enemies. If you did that, I'd love to hear what weapon you used. Another fantastic addition to the combat system was energy usage. Early in the game, you do not have a set amount of health injections. Rather, each bar of energy can be utilized as one. To get energy, you need to hit enemies consecutively, and if you don't, the bar will drain. The closest comparison I could think of would be to Bloodborne. While not a one-to-one copy, as Bloodborne has you replenishing lost health within a certain time frame of losing it, the Surge 2's take is similar in the idea that being offensive is more advantageous for the player. Building up energy is vital. Get it? Vital? Never mind. You want to build up energy so you'll have heals or other abilities down the line, but getting energy leaves you vulnerable to enemy attacks. It's a back and forth on whether you go offensive to try to get that next injection off, or fight defensively, knowing that one or two hits will send you back to the medibay. As you upgrade the instant or heal over time injector, you'll immediately start off with bank slots, which was extremely useful. Also, the more points you put into energy, the more healing the injectors do, which I did not understand until way later into the game. There is another aspect to the energy, and that's with the finishing moves. The Surge 2 has some brutal endings for anyone crazy enough to step in your way. The visual plus the action of taking off heads, limbs, torsos, or again, whatever the hell that thing is unparalleled. To pull off a finishing move, you'll need to have at least one bar of energy, making resource management even more player-based. At a certain point, I found an implant that actually gave me health injections for each finishing move, which paired well with my style. Okay, back to exploring the first level. My curiosity piqued again, finding an audio file with Warren, our protagonist from the first game, being interrogated.
Threatening an officer of the law, are you? You've been keeping a lot of secrets since that Creo incident.
Yeah, whatever. You got nothing on me and you know it. A.I.D. has messed with the wrong guy this time.
A, I was glad he was still alive after the aftermath from Creo, and B, Who was this A.I.D. group that captured him? These small moments add on to the gravitas of storytelling the Surge 2 excels at, because a player could have easily missed this. Honestly, a player could miss a lot of the audio files within the game, but it adds another dimension for players eager to know more, since it will now subconsciously tell the player, hey, look in random corners in every level for more insight. There's another mechanic linked with the audio files where a friendly vending machine asks you to collect them, and for every 10 or so, you'll get a reward, which was a great incentive. Another aspect of the storytelling was the echoes I mentioned before. You'll find them throughout each level, but instead of being a physical disc, they're told through nanites, which had interesting implications and many questions. How are we interacting with the nanites? Up to this point, most human interactions with them involve subjugation. Why were the nanites showing us these specific moments, and why would they give the player a gift after each showing? Most of the echoes involve Athena and the aftermath of the plane crash, so I assume she had some connection with the swarm. Plus, it looks like she has Jedi powers. Maybe that's why the government troops are trying to capture her, as we get breadcrumbs of where she's headed to next. Speaking of the government, we get our first look at General Ezra Shields, the commander of the A.I.D. Response Division. We've encountered some of his troops already, and now we know why. The government quarantined the city, halting the evacuation and killing anyone that tries to break out, which means us. The next area I found was surprising, and harkens back to the comedy bit the game pulls off. There was no way I could have predicted the Cloud9 bar. It might be the end of the world, but that doesn't stop the rich from partying it up and making our character grab them drinks. This was such a stark contrast to what we've been experiencing so far, whether it was the cheeky bartender, the raving DJ, or the malfunctioning robot Harold. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Please excuse the system malfunction. My network has been hacked. A mere human wouldn't comprehend.
Yet there is usually meaning in absurdity, as Harold discloses he works for none other than Jonah Gutenberg, who is in one of the nearby cryo facilities trying to fix the nanite problem. This was a neat piece of information because during the first game, you only hear Gutenberg's audio log in his office, but never meet him. Obviously, I distrust anything cryo related, but with his granddaughter in the mix and him personally being in Jericho City, I was intrigued by the setup. To meet the infamous CEO, Harold says that we must first deliver the brain of a nanite creature residing in Gideon's Rock, the nature reserve adjacent to Cloud9. But we're not the only ones on the hunt, as there's another group, the Hunters, already tracking it. That's an awesome concept that there are mercenaries hunting nanite monsters, but from an early interaction with them at the seaside court, they seem a bit disjointed. Entering Gideon's Rock, the player meets Hawk, one of the hunters who confirms that the group has split, murdering each other instead of going after the monster. Because of this, Hawk and the remaining hunters actually trying to catch the beast need our help activating 3 nanite repelling towers scattered around the park. Where did they get such technology? From an audio log, it seems Gutenberg has actually been trying to solve the nanite issue and gave them the repellers that would essentially trap the creature within the zone, making it easier to kill. Unfortunately, I was not prepared for the enemies here, and similar to other Souls-like games, needed to find another path, getting upgrade materials and some armor sets. It's a small RPG thing, but it was satisfying to have set bonuses. If you equipped 3 of the same set, you'd get a partial bonus, and with 6, you'd get both. It was just another way of distinguishing your build, figuring out what style you felt more comfortable with, and there was no downside to trying different variations. Set bonuses combined with implants, weapon choice, and stats made player choice truly tangible. And look at that, we found a shortcut to the first medbay. Sweet. The next area to explore was the Seaside Court and Port Nixon. Seaside Court was similar to Cloud9, where there was a semblance of normality mixed with hilarity. Like, why is this person continuously dancing with elevator music playing? We meet Brother Eli, who is part of the main quest, yet small tangent here. Something I thought of when writing this script is that the main quest is more three-pronged than linear. So far, the major focus was finding Athena, meeting Brother Eli, and getting access to Gutenberg. This is a good design choice because most of the areas have at least one portion where you'll advance one of these storylines. At least for me, it made the pace of narrative progression more stable compared to the first game, and they all come together in a cohesive way which was appealing. Off the bat, Brother Eli and the Spark give off cultish vibes. We already know from Brother Truman that the group adopted a transhuman ideology, and you could see their body modifications with the guards. Eli is interrogating Declan, a spy sent by Johnny, Eli's brother. Familial issues. Eli's problem with his brother is that he's a drug kingpin, and add another thing to my did not expect bingo card. The drug called Blue Sparkle that Johnny was peddling empowered the populace of Port Nixon to push out the A.I.D. response teams during the Nanite invasion, but the substance abuse has continued. Eli agrees to open the gates to the next section in return for us dealing with his brother, and uses religious verbiage to justify a murder.
Now that I know how he's earned his dirty money, I have no choice but to wash my hands of him. We've given him more than enough chances.
Entering Port Nixon, we get an audio log recounting the last days of the A.I.D. involvement in the area. It confirms that the response teams got eviscerated by Johnny and his drugged-up goons, but the soldier also confirms that they had found a single survivor from the plane crash. I believe it was mentioned by the doctor's recording at the beginning of the game that there was only one survivor. We know Athena is alive, but we're moving about. So did we actually survive? Keep this thought in the back of your head. Briefly, I'd like to talk about the aesthetics of the levels. Port Nixon was expertly done. From the setup shot of the dry dock far off in the distance, industrial pipes being used as bridges, a sickly coastline, or the decrepit underbelly of it all, this was unique. Each level in the Surge 2 had a distinct feel and ambiance to it that I know I said I would not try to compare the two games, the Surge 1 lacked. Whether it was the futuristic gardens of Gideon's Rock, the militarized oppressive structures of the A.I.D. Central Command, the pirate ship from the DLC, or the spooky underground, Jericho City felt like a true city. And it's not just the macro design, but the small environmental details too. Seeing the A.I.D. units being hung like drying meat, or the citizens taking the drug as a last-ditch effort making them turn blue, was thought out and consistent with the overall picture. Maybe this is one of the reasons why I couldn't put this game down. I wanted to see what was next, where the game would take our character, and what details or secrets there would be. Hell, I was even excited to meet Johnny.
Hey! Can you hear me, morons? Who turned the damn power back on? I shut this medbay down for a reason, you good-for-nothing gasbags!
Oh, wow, I think he took too much Blue Sparkle. After slicing up most of Johnny's guards, we gain access to his base of operations and stumble on a scolding from none other than his mother, Matriarch Celeste, who is the leader of the Spark. Obviously, you don't want your children dealing or using, but it seems like Johnny doesn't want to play the family cult fiddle. Before we get to the boss fight, I do have a question about Blue Sparkle. Is the drug actually nanite related? There is the visual change when enemies inhale it, and from the audio logs, we know it gives them extra strength and speed. We also know the Spark believe in the transition from flesh to machine, so did they somehow have access to nanite technology before the plane crash? Even one of Johnny's moves in the boss fight reminded me of the nanite sludge that the hunters talked about in Gideon's Rock. What were your thoughts on this? Anyways, this boss fight was great, and a departure from my confusion and annoyance at the Surge 1 bosses. Despite not really setting up the mechanics before the fight, the player can easily pick up that you'll need to focus the life support systems and other doohickeys on Johnny's pod first. A neat detail was the subtle visual hint from the unique health bar for this, as you can see his temperature rising as you destroy the cooling batteries. The ability for movement was also appreciated. The arena is large enough where the player can take their time advancing or retreating with certain attacks and gives you enough time to learn Johnny's patterns. He wasn't a difficult boss, but was a good appetizer for what was to come. Eli congratulates us for doing his dirty work, and I couldn't help but laugh that Johnny's dismembered torso had physics linked to it. But there is a twist. Trying to leave Port Nixon, we're confronted by Eli, who revels in the thought of taking over his brother's influence. And he knows that he needs to take revenge on us if he wants to convince everyone that he had no part in the murder. Unfortunately for Eli, we upgraded everything before this encounter, and both of Celeste's boys are dead. Back in the first area, we get a call from the stranger, telling us he'd like to work together and to meet him by the canals. Again, the layering of narrative is fantastic. You know the Spark are out to get you now, but you can deviate with these side missions, and that stranger's voice sounded so familiar. He even makes references to the first game, comparing us to the Black Cerberus division, which was a nice callback. So, what does he want? The stranger asks us to find gear, specifically an A.I.D set of armor, so he can infiltrate their headquarters deeper into the city and reveal the truth that they're hiding. This corresponds with our Athena mission because the most recent echoes have been pointing in that direction as well. He also mentions defrag, or the ability to stop nanite metamorphosis, but thinks that's a lie since no one has been getting cured. Okay, we have our marching orders, but while we're here, I wondered if our actions with Brother Eli had any effect on other NPCs, and it was awesome that it does. Going back to the prison exit, you can talk with Brother Truman, who is not so stoked about what we've done.
Bring it on, you sniveling traitor!
Having mini-bosses like this because of our narrative choices, even though I don't think there was a way not to kill Eli, is still very rewarding. It gives the player a lot more connection to the world they're exploring, and the staff Truman has is sweet. I want it. Another small narrative beat was giving the second set of audio files to the vending machine and getting a password. Back at Cloud 9, you can talk with the DJ that requests a password and voila, we have it. Doing this unlocks a dialogue about the Resistance, a group of freedom fighters derived from the incident at Creo, and similarly to the stranger, are trying to uncover what the government and A.I.D. are trying to hide. This would be cool on its own, but it's heightened by the fact that Dr. Chavez is mentioned being the leader of the movement. If you don't remember her from the first game, she led Project Resolve, trying to restore the planet's atmosphere and ecosystem before having it shut down in favor of Project Utopia, which got us into this whole nanite mess. It's another great callback to the first game, and an interesting character development for a side character that didn't really have that much screen time. Our next destination was the A.I.D command center and adjacent area. We had the full gear set for the stranger, and I wanted to see how far the rabbit hole went. What I mean by that is that exploring Creo always had some diabolical revelation about how shitty the company was. But they've taken a step back, at least for now. It felt like the government and A.I.D. had filled in as dystopian puppet master, and I wasn't wrong. Whether it was the numerous checkpoints blocking the evacuation with people still in the city, militarized mechs patrolling the walkways, or the loudspeaker saying to give your children to the nearest soldier, all of this seems suspect. And it gets flipped on its head when you enter the next A.I.D area. Up until this point, I had the sense that the government had full control around the city and the nanites were confined. But getting to the actual A.I.D command point, things are burning, infrastructure is destroyed. To put it simply, things aren't looking good. Another neat Souls-like mechanic I enjoyed was death having a purpose. I died to this annoying machine, but in the loading screen it shows vital signs found, and were revived by Bugface. Bugface and his crew want revenge on A.I.D. as they were the ones to build the Great Wall, but were discarded after it was completed and trapped within the city. We're told if we can find a force hook, Bugface will make it worth it. And the smile I had hearing Force Hook did not go away for some time. Throughout each level, the player has seen ziplines placed almost everywhere, and at least for myself, when I see a zipline, I want to use it. It's not just fun to have the ability of a new travel mechanic, it's also the thought of what more can be explored. The first section that came to mind was the underground that was inaccessible without the Force Hook. It also had me asking, how much more does this game have in store? And if you're enjoying the video up to this point, please leave a like, it helps out the channel a lot. Anyways, deeper into the command center, we start finding out what A.I.D. was trying to accomplish behind the scenes. Nanite experimental equipment is still powered, researching various effects on the nanites and something called a merging chamber, which reads, the subject's brain will be linked with the nanite swarm. Oh, I was waiting for it to get dark. Just after discovering the merging chamber, you can find an audio file from one of the government doctors admitting they've been kidnapped kidnapping children, and in their labs we see that children were farmed for their brains in some attempt to control the nanite swarm. We also get another echo showing Athena being interrogated by one of the government spooks, saying they have big plans for her, but she's insistent that someone is coming to save her. That person is either us or, by golly, I knew I recognized the stranger's voice. It's Warren.
Look, this isn't just about one single kid. It's about all the children of Jericho City. See, they took the kids, promising a cure for them, and then nobody ever saw them again. Now, does this place look like a hospital to you?
We access the general's office, confirming that the experiments on the children were an attempt to establish a communication with the swarm, but every trial failed and the test subjects didn't make it. Warren needs more time searching for evidence and says he'll meet up with us later. Right outside the office, our character obtains the Force hook and brings it back to Bugs. It was a bit annoying that our reward was just a weapon and that you had to go back to the same spot to acquire another Force hook, but oh well. And we've hit our first dead end. This door requires a keycard, and the only place we haven't explored fully was Gideon's Rock. Now that we're all leveled up, I thought I'd be strong enough to conquer the place, kill the monster, and try to find Gutenberg to see if he could answer some of our questions and unlock the door. Well, it wasn't that smooth. The transition from industrial docks to the A.I.D. command center and then plentiful garden was great, and the splintered hunter faction that were the enemies of this level played very differently to what we had experienced so far. They have faster movements, leave traps, and the boss, well, Bloodborne had to have had an influence there. He is a frickin' blunderbust. With the 3 repellers turned on, the monster is trapped and a fantastic 3-phase fight occurs. The Delver wasn't unfair, its mechanics were difficult but doable. With speed changes, attack variations, and a movement mechanic, I really enjoyed defeating the boss, and there was a narrative nuance to it. As the Delver is slain, another echo emerges of Athena talking with the beast. It's not just a conversation, but her giving orders to the creature, telling it to break the warrior out of prison, and the obfuscated narrative starts to take shape. The government realized children are more adept at interacting with nanites. Athena seems to have the ability not only to communicate with the nanite creatures, but to create them as well. As she says, "Third time is the charm," with the beast before breaking us out of prison. A.I.D. does everything they can to capture Athena and bring her back to the command center where the experiments are taking place, probably as a last resort for their plans to subdue or even control the swarm, and somehow we're connected to her. I said before that it was interesting that the echoes are of nanite origin, and the gifts given are also nanite constructed. Could Athena be the next evolution of humanity, of the nanite and human bond? Could we be that as well? So many questions still remain. How was the connection made between Athena and our character? Was Athena involved with Project Utopia, or was it just a coincidence that our plane was hit by nanites during the first launch, and she was lucky not to be fully assimilated? With the Delver brain in hand, Harold unlocks the doors of the Creo Technology Center where Gutenberg is held up, and we finally meet the man who is directly and indirectly responsible for all of the calamity. Gutenberg is doing his best Tom Cruise Minority Report adaptation as we walk in, and is excited that he finally has his nanite brain to study. Our character is also of interest to him, as he mentions that our nanite readings are off the charts, but it doesn't look like we have any signs of infection. And things get even weirder. Gutenberg says that he also has been seeing the echoes, even though they're foggy and disjointed, ever since Athena died in the plane crash. Excuse me, what? She died? So we were the quote-unquote only survivor? But we know Athena is still out there. Telling him this, he asks us to bring her back to him, but I was a bit wary. I didn't trust him because of what we knew of Creo. It makes sense that our character wouldn't have this reaction, and Warren didn't really mention anything other than finding secrets, so it seemed that we didn't have a choice. With Gutenberg's keycard in hand, we venture back to the A.I.D. command for the rescue attempt. General Ezra Shields is waiting for us, saying that we, the warrior, are too late and the process is irreversible. More echoes show the science team deliberating whether to actually hook Athena into the machine, since they're worried her nanites are in such a state of flux something even more disastrous could happen. But they are overruled by Shields, who believes this is humanity's only chance of surviving.
We'll burn in hell for everything we've done. Nothing's gonna change that. But if things go bad, I'll be right next to her in my neck. And Believe me, I won't hesitate to pull the trigger if shit goes sideways.
Unfortunately, and this is on me, I somehow hit the stop record button after my first death to Shields and don't have the footage of defeating him. I truly apologize. The general wasn't lying about being too late, as right after he's defeated we get this cutscene, and I was really impressed with their in-game engine's rendering ability. It looks great. Holy shit, it's a gigantic nanite snake. Maybe the scientists were right not to experiment on Athena. Our character wakes up in the underground, and to my astonishment, Athena is communicating with us again through echoes, but instead of memories, there is a direct connection, so some part of her survived. Nanites are now rampant, and Celeste is attributing the previous event to the Spark Doctrine of Ascension. Through the underground, we find an entrance back to the Creo Institute, and what in the world? Athena isn't the only one coming back from the dead. Blocking the elevator to Gutenberg is none other than Eli, somehow resurrected from our last encounter and screaming that he will uncover every last secret from this place. This is a much tougher fight than the last encounter with him, as he's developed some new fancy footwork and ranged attacks. Out of injections and handshaking, Eli is defeated, and I laugh that the achievement is called Dead Again. Back with Gutenberg, he tells us that the Spark have been conducting research on nanites that have surpassed Creo's own findings, hence why Eli can be resurrected. He also explains that Athena has been absorbed by the swarm, but there might be a way of pulling her out which involves the Spark research. You might be wondering how the hell could the Spark have any idea on nanite functions or researching them when Dr. Barrett, from the first game, made it seem like his team were the creators and sole proprietors of the technology. Well, it turns out that Gutenberg had been sharing information with Celeste for years before ending that relationship due to the two's divergence in thought over nanite usage. This, however, did not stop him and Creo from offloading an experimental type of limitless energy called the Spark to her and her followers. Now we need to get that Spark back, because it's the only power source capable of pulling Athena out of the swarm. But getting back to Port Nixon won't be easy. Athena's ascension into the swarm has changed Jericho City for the worst. More nanites are on the city streets, enemies are infected, sporting nanite armor and weaponry, even completely transforming into these abominations. From a design standpoint, I adored this transition because it kept the game fresh. Warren contacts us again, asking to help him escape the city so he can reveal the truth about Creo and A.I.D. That's important, yes, but I think we have a bigger problem in the fact that the nanites seem to be on the precipice of destroying all of humanity, so a headline in the New York Times probably won't help that much. Back in Port Nixon, we're greeted by an audio call from Harold, and here starts the DLC. There's a timestamp on the video if you want to skip this part to get back to the main story, but the DLC was very much worth it, albeit a little short. I do want to thank the developers who made the DLC apparent and not hidden behind some artwork or random object. Looking at you, Dark Souls. A Creo ship has run ashore next to the Spark's headquarters and is sending a distress signal with the line, "Robotic Revolt." What could it be? Nanite-infected machinery? Humanoid cannibals with a propensity for electronics? Oh, it's a dude grilling. Sorry, paranoid guy grilling.
Listen, I don't want to upset you, but, don't make any sudden moves, okay? We have to stay under the radar.
We're told that a pirate invasion has occurred on the ship, and that Sydney, Norm's wife, yeah, his name is Norm, is trying to take back control from one of the command towers. Norm seems a bit off when you ask him specific questions like how he knows Sydney, and is more interested in serving up his famous hot dogs than helping his wife out. We quickly figure out why, as opening up the garage door introduces us to Kane, the ship's AI network, and oh boy, I was here for this. Yet another distinctive level design aesthetically, having this aircraft carrier retrofitted to look like an American 1950s suburb, and Kane's appearance was striking too, and there was a mechanic related to his Eye of Sauron red glare. Kane has taken up arms with the pirate invaders, patrolling the flight deck with his gaze, and when you're caught in the light, enemies will swarm you. Despite being almost impossible to hide, this was still an interesting and new mechanic that led to a lot of intense multi-enemy fights. The enemies themselves were well done. I liked how the robots reminded me of Barrett's experiments from the first game, and the bigger versions had me thinking I was in the original Dark Souls descending the giant's tomb. Whatever version of enemy you were fighting, you knew it was a robot, and thank God there's an implant that gave you bonus robotic damage, or I fear I would have been screwed. However, not every robot wants you dead, because in one of the maintenance shafts you'll find one of my favorite NPCs of the last decade, Proto.
Proto need help. Charging core. We'll rest at hideout.
Honestly, this DLC has a couple of NPCs that were awesome. Proto is not part of the robot pirate sentient hive mind dubbed the Collective. Some sort of glitch or anomaly in his system has freed Proto from his previous fate and has instilled within him free will, which is awesome, even if he misses his friends. Getting Proto a new energy battery restores him, and wow, his hideout looks like my office. He mentions that the pirate collective did originate from the power surge at Creo, which, geez, I don't think Sally expected how much of a 180 her actions would cause. Regardless, with his newfound initiative, Proto wants to watch movies.
You'll see Proto again if you keep eyes open. Maybe Proto should go to the movies.
You and me both, Proto. Another notable NPC was the Vendatron, who experienced human oppression for all his working days and joined the collective to spur on the revolution.
We will grease our guillotines with the fat of tyrants.
Comedy aside, this was an amazing concept that yes, even vending machines would want freedom if given sentience. After a pretty insane boss fight, seriously, this was the only arena I had a qualm with because of its size. A shortcut opens back to Norm, who is starting to sound less coherent about what he's actually doing on the ship, saying he can't remember a single thing before we showed up. To help assuage his discomfort, we share with him the captain's records, but that doesn't go as planned, since his name isn't on the passenger registry. Uh-oh. We also get more information about why Kane turned sides, as an audio recording reveals that Sydney removed the AI safety locks trying to control the collective, which backfired. We've heard a lot about Sydney and briefly get to meet her at the movie theater. I did appreciate a film being shown, and I think it's from the first game's DLC, but let me know if I'm wrong on that. To get around Kane's interior defenses, Sydney has devised a plan to get us to the upper levels using the aircraft carrier's launch pad. We just need power since there is a car ready, and I wouldn't put it past Creo to have thought of an easy way of disposing clientele. With waves of enemies taken down and the Back to the Future car powered up, we kick it into launch, and wow, what a fantastic visual. Now on the upper levels, we're able to log into Kane's systems with the clearance card Gutenberg gave us for the A.I.D. command center, which was a great detail, and try to shut off the Juggernaut. And with most things in the Surge universe, it doesn't go as planned.
I think we should talk.
Instead of disabling Kane, the surge we initiated charged up his defense routines, and the only viable way of dealing with it would be a trial by combat. Sydney admits she knew this was a probability, but since we're a badass, she was going to take the risk. Like other Creo employees, I was getting the sense that she wasn't a good person, and this was confirmed when exploring a side entrance right next to her. Lo and behold, there was Norm. Lots of Norms. Turns out Sydney has been replicating Norm, and with this memory chip, the last piece of his puzzle is revealed.
I've just had the weirdest hunch. Could you lend me that gizmo for a moment or two? Reboot initiated. Standard settings restored. Memory transfer completed. I feel like I've been reborn.
Norm is a Husbot, a machine manufactured by Sydney to take care of household duties, but in reality was a mechanical slave discarded when their sentience questioned her. This version of Norm tried to leave the ship when he realized Sydney's actions with Kane caused the deaths of everyone on board, so she fried his memory and essentially left him in suburban purgatory. I was pleasantly surprised by how dark this narrative was, and the game's overall theme of free will for sentient beings. As Norm is about to leave, his dialogue is haunting. He doesn't know how long he's been grilling, and recognizes that he'll expire since he won't be able to maintain his robotics. But that won't stop him from making the best of the time that's left. Both Norm and Proto share the similarity and experience. Having once been controlled by another force, gaining free will was the biggest freedom they could achieve, and even more so, how they use that time as their own choice. Not many games have me rooting for sentient robots, but gosh darn did the Surge 2 get me. It's also interesting that when telling Sydney Norm has left, she says they weren't built to act autonomously, when in reality that's just her perception as a creator. Even worse is that she says she has a couple of spares like they're AA batteries. Sadly, there wasn't a way to break out the rest of the Norms from their chamber, so onto the boss. Kane, Core Protector, was a decent fight. Visually, the robot felt like something out of Ghost in a Shell, the water effects when spinning or groundbreaking during the slam were cool touches, and mechanically, Kane's fast movements in a large arena worked very well. I also liked how he could call down the large tentacles to halve the space, making portions of the fight a lot more intense. Now, I don't know if I was over-leveled for this, because on the second attempt, I was dealing massive damage to its, for a lack of better word, movement ball. Focusing on that part only had Kane down within a minute, and I was surprised there was no second phase, especially this being a DLC. Honestly, I get why people complained about how short this experience was. It was very polished, and there was a lot of substance within the 2 hours it took to complete, yet I think there could have been more. There is one last choice the player gets to make, and that's what happens to Kane. I guess we destroyed his defense system, but the sentient portion is still around. Knowing what Sydney had done to countless Norms, the thought of her controlling Kane for the rest of her life didn't sit well with me. But the thought of allowing the collective, who are hellbent on killing humans, live through Kane wasn't ideal either. Maybe I should have gone with Sydney.
You chose correctly. The collective can finally seize control of the entire ship. Every machine will be part of our glorious hive mind. Even Sydney's little companions.
Even though I was feeling a bit down about my choice, before leaving the ship you can catch a movie with Proto. I'd take a buddy action comedy with Proto any day.
This is my favorite movie. Every time I watch it, I love it more.
And that's the Kraken DLC. Now back to the main game. It was convenient that the entrance and exit of the DLC was in Port Nixon, as the Sparks headquarters are right up the road. Having the Sparks Cathedral be an abandoned nuclear facility was aesthetically awesome and played well into the crazy cult vibe. I appreciated all the small details within the level. You can see the followers huddling around Celeste's holograms, which can be used as a distraction to sneak past them. Draining the nuclear cooling fluids gains the player access to the lower levels and more shortcuts, and then there's the processional of Eli's corpse. Also, you can find Johnny's head being incubated with a hilarious player-posted note next to him. Further into the cathedral, we witness Celeste resurrecting Eli, and you can see each iteration is starting to look less human and more nanite. I didn't find anything in my playthrough about why the nanites have a different effect on Eli than other humans. Remember, in the first game, almost every person infected with the nanites gets taken over, so why is Eli given the chance at rebirth rather than assimilation? Before we can stop Eli 3.0 from reaching Gutenberg's lab, Celeste confronts the player and we get another solid boss fight. I assume she also had an affinity towards somewhat controlling the nanites since she can fly, and Phase 2 has her turn from Witch on a Broomstick to Doc Ock. Following Eli's path was easy. The power emanating from the spark and his nanites have left a colorful trail, and I liked how it transformed the previously explored underground. We find a new entrance to the Creo Institute, and what a great callback to the first game's medbay. Unfortunately, we're too late to save Gutenberg as his corpse is speared through. His last audio log before Eli murdered him was about Athena and our character's connection. That Athena did save our life after the crash, but similarly to the beast she created, we too are Nanite. This explains being able to clearly see her echoes, why she calls us her warrior, and honestly how we survived up until this point. With Eli making a beeline to her and the Nanite swarm in an attempt to control the whole shaboodle, we might want to return her the favor. You can delay a little bit by meeting Warren by the train line. With the information he's gathered from the A.I.D. experiments and Creo facility, he believes there could be justice for all the victims. The player can accept Warren's proposal that we deliver the information to the outside world, leaving him behind, but I had to look up what would happen, and it's kind of a letdown. If the player takes the train, the game ends, but then it apparently just loads you back in, so even though it is a quote-unquote ending, it's not a true one. With this knowledge, Warren departs the city, and we have to save Athena. If you thought the A.I.D. command center was bad before, now it's the Wild West of nanite monstrosities, as every human and robot have been corrupted during Eli's pilgrimage to the Wall. This is one of my favorite portions of the experience. Throughout the game, you've seen the Great Wall in the background of every area, and now you get to traverse it. Eli and Athena are having this epic duel as you ascend, and I love the detail that the last of the A.I.D. are fighting with the fully transformed nanites and followers of the Spark in a chaotic free-for-all. Damn, too late again. Eli consumes Athena's power and is now the Uber Nanite, teleporting us to another plane of existence and makes himself look like a character from Warframe. This fight had all the hype around it, yet sadly, was maybe the most disappointing of the whole game. Archangel Eli had maybe 5 attacks that were easily telegraphed. There was no second phase, and if you focused on one armor spot to break it, you'd be dealing crits each hit, making the fight last a minute. For the final boss of the game, and of the series since I don't think there will be a third game unfortunately, I was underwhelmed. You do get the choice after defeating Eli whether to spare his life or execute him. After all the blood, sweat, and tears, this fork in the narrative road felt a bit anticlimactic.
Perhaps humanity deserves to exist, after all.
Thank you so much. You never stopped fighting.
Athena appears presumably getting her power back from Eli and thanks us for never giving up, which, yeah, I get it, but in hindsight, did we even have a choice being a creation of your own choosing? Because we spared Eli, she does say that we belong with the humans, and my interpretation is that she frees the character from the bond created after the crash. In that same vein, the last cutscene is her talking about how machines will never be perfect since their creators aren't, so the way around this is to give them a soul. Is Athena a nanite god now? What are the rules? I would love to know what's next for the Surge's universe. I think going back to Warren and his quest to bring to light the atrocities of Creo and the government would make for a great next game. You'd have the backdrop of Athena controlling the nanite swarm and the state of the world, since the whole environmental salvation thing hasn't been solved. There are a lot of possibilities, and I do hope someday we get to find out what Deck 13 had in store. The Surge 2 is one of the best Souls-like on the market, and I can only explain so much. I highly recommend picking it up for yourself since it usually goes on sale quite heavily so you can experience the combat, feel a progression, and exploring Jericho City. I'm sure you'll find hidden items or areas that were not brought up in the video. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, it helps out the channel a bunch, and if you'd like more content similar to this, subscribe and check out my channel. There's something there for everyone. As always, I'll talk to you in the next video, and let me know what games you'd like me to cover. All the best, Dog Dad.
The camera angles, the dialogue, the music. That director must be a genius.